She was just like a best friend, but also my cousin, and I'm just, just hurt because
It's just so overwhelming. Over the last few weeks, that's what I was going through.
On November 24th, 2022, Thanksgiving night in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, police uncovered a horrifying secret buried beneath layers of concrete. Inside a tote bag, stuffed within a larger construction sack, lay the body of 23-year-old Adriana Taylor. She had been missing for weeks, but the truth of where she was and what had happened to her was worse than anyone in her family could have imagined. The discovery stunned both Cleveland, where Adriana had last been seen, and Pittsburgh, where she was ultimately found. Investigators confirmed she had been hidden away in a backyard, tied to the man she trusted most, her 43-year-old boyfriend, Anthony Kennedy. What made this case so chilling wasn't just the brutality of the crime, but the betrayal behind it. Adriana wasn't a stranger to Kennedy. She lived with him, shared her daily life with him, and believed she had a future by his side. Instead, the person closest to her became the one who silenced her forever. But to understand the weight of this tragedy, we must first know the young woman whose life was cut short far too soon. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a cousin, and a friend. This is the life and death of Adriana Taylor.
Adriana was a sweetheart. Just, I want to say, a free spirit. We heard so many things about him and his anger issues and things that he would say in front of other people at work. And so all the fingers, pointed to him.
Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania is a small, historic borough just east of Pittsburgh, known for its tight-knit community, cultural diversity, and quiet residential charm. Tree-lined streets, Victorian homes, local festivals, and murals give parts of the borough a welcoming feel, though investment and upkeep vary block by block. In 2022, however, the crime situation was severe. Violent crime soared to well over double the national average, driven by alarmingly high rates of assault, robbery, and even murder. Property crime also surged, and this was the home of Adriana. But this wasn't where she was born. Adriana Thierry Taylor was born on March 3, 1999 in Marysville, Ohio, to Anya Kiri Perry and Cedric Taylor. She grew up in Cleveland, surrounded by a large and loving family that included her siblings, Wade, Josh, Teresia, Cedric, and Tynesia. To those who knew her best, Adriana was simply Dree. Some affectionately called her Age. No matter the nickname, one thing was certain: she was unforgettable. Adriana was educated in the Cleveland public school system, where she quickly stood out for her outgoing personality and magnetic energy. Friends and teachers alike noticed how easily she connected with people. She wasn't just present in a room, she commanded it with her laughter, her smile, and her ability to make everyone feel included. Family members often described her as the life of the party. If someone was in a bad mood, Adriana had a gift for pulling them out of it. If others were happy, she added to their joy. One cousin remembered that she had a smile so bright you couldn't help but smile back. Her compassion wasn't just reserved for family and friends. Adriana was also a dedicated worker. No matter what job she took on, she gave it her all. Her co-workers often felt like they were part of her extended family. She treated everyone with kindness, and in return, she earned the admiration of those around her. To her Aunt Kelly, Adriana was a sweetheart and a beautiful girl. To her mother, she was a source of pride, and to her siblings and cousins, she was a confidant, a partner in laughter, and someone they could always rely on. But like many young adults searching for stability, Adriana's personal life drew her into a relationship that would eventually lead to devastating consequences. In her early 20s, Adriana began seeing Anthony Kennedy, a man 20 years older than her. At 43 years old, Anthony seemed to offer maturity and steadiness. Despite the wide age gap, their bond grew, and Adriana eventually moved in with him at a duplex on the 3200 block of West 98th Street in Cleveland. At first, it may have looked like a step toward building a life together. But to her family, something felt off. She seemed quieter, more reserved. And there were whispers about Anthony's anger issues, behavior that painted him as controlling and sometimes explosive. Court records later revealed that in 2019, Anthony had been charged after allegedly strangling another girlfriend. Though the case was ultimately reduced, experts often warn that strangulation is one of the clearest red flags for escalating violence. Still, Adriana pressed on, hopeful that love could overcome those shadows. Tragically, that hope would come at the highest cost. The last time Adriana's family had contact with her was on October 8th. After that day, her phone went silent. Calls were never returned. Text messages went unanswered. Even her social media presence, once active and lively, suddenly stopped. At first, her loved ones clung to the possibility that she was simply busy or taking a break. But as days turned into weeks, the silence became unbearable, and they knew something was wrong. Adriana was not the type of person to cut off contact without explanation. On November 13, 2022, more than 5 weeks after they had last heard from her, Adriana's aunt and cousin filed a missing person report with Cleveland police. They told officers this was completely out of character and begged them to help them. Detectives immediately began tracing her last known movements. The investigation led them back to the West 98th Street duplex she shared with Anthony. But Adriana was nowhere to be found. Then came a disturbing break in the case. Adriana's car had been flagged by a license plate reader, not in Cleveland, but across the state line in Pennsylvania. Police recovered the vehicle and transported it back to Cleveland for forensic analysis, but Adriana herself was still missing. For her family, the uncertainty was unbearable. Each day without answers deepened the dread. It was the biggest shock. We were hoping that she would be found alive, her Aunt Kelly would later say, but hope collapsed on Thanksgiving night. That evening, a neighbor in Wilkinsburg noticed something strange outside a home in the 800 block of Hill Avenue. Their Ring doorbell camera had captured a man, later identified as Anthony Kennedy, unloading a bag from his car and heading into the backyard. The activity was unusual enough to raise suspicions, and the neighbor quickly tipped off police. Officers arrived and began searching the property. What they unearthed was as horrifying as it was heartbreaking. Beneath layers of both wet and dry concrete in the backyard, police discovered a construction bag. Inside that was a tote bag, and inside that tote bag was the lifeless body of Adriana Taylor. The Allegheny County medical examiner later confirmed that Adriana had died from a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Her death was ruled a homicide. The discovery stunned 2 cities. Adriana hadn't simply disappeared. She had been killed, transported across state lines, and buried in an attempt to erase her existence. But as investigators processed the scene, one chilling fact became clear. This case was only just beginning. In the hours after Adriana's body was identified, the Cleveland Division of Police and the Allegheny County authorities worked quickly to connect the dots. The Wilkinsburg Hill Avenue property, where Adriana's body was found, was linked directly to Anthony's family. He had lived there in the past, and relatives were still connected to the home. The suspicions were undeniable, but when officers attempted to locate Anthony, he had already vanished. But the cops were not letting him go. Within days, an arrest warrant was issued for aggravated murder. Federal agencies, including the FBI and U.S. Marshals, joined the case, treating Anthony as a fugitive. Crime Stoppers distributed flyers with his photo, and rewards were offered for tips that could lead to his capture. The manhunt was on. But investigators still needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence that tied Anthony directly to the crime. And soon enough, that evidence began to surface. Detectives pieced together the grim puzzle, moving across state lines to retrace Anthony's steps. The most crucial lead came from that neighbor's Ring doorbell camera. The footage had truly captured Anthony unloading a bag from his vehicle at the Wilkinsburg property, then disappearing toward the backyard. The same backyard where Adriana's body was later found beneath fresh concrete. Then there was Adriana's car. Earlier flagged in Pennsylvania, it had been shipped back to Cleveland for forensic processing. Investigators believed Anthony had transported both Adriana's car and her body across state lines, complicating the case and expanding its jurisdiction. Soon, authorities also confirmed something chilling. Adriana most likely had been killed in Cleveland before being moved to Pennsylvania. That meant the West 98th Street duplex, the home she shared with Anthony, was more than just a last known location. It was very likely the primary crime scene.
Well, IT News is everywhere as the search for a woman's killer continues. Police in 2 states searching for Anthony Kennedy. He's wanted for the murder of Adriana Taylor. At 4 o'clock, we told you about his violent criminal background. Everywhere at 5, we have new details about how that missing woman was found. See, a New Yorker has been digging, and she shares what she recovered.
I want to warn you that some of these details are graphic. Our police sources in Pennsylvania told us that Adriana's body was found inside of a tote bag, buried under concrete. Now, they say they were tipped off by neighbors who saw someone moving around that backyard and knew something was wrong. This is a neighbor's surveillance footage of the night police found Adriana Taylor's body buried in the backyard of this home in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. Police sources there tell us her body was found inside of a tote bag, which was placed inside a bigger construction bag. Those bags were found under wet and dry concrete, indicating recent activity. They were tipped off by a neighbor whose Ring doorbell camera recorded the scene. Police say Anthony Kennedy was spotted near the backyard that night. Right now, the 43-year-old man is one of Northeast Ohio's most wanted. Investigators say he shot the 23-year-old woman in the head and buried her. 19 Investigates uncovered documents showing that Kennedy's sister once lived or lives in that home. Adriana's family told police she lived with Kennedy here in Cleveland, but after not hearing from her since early October, they reported her missing on November 13th. 19 Investigates found that 2 days after she was reported missing, Kennedy had a court hearing for a weapons charge in Summit County. Kennedy has a criminal history, including domestic violence. In 2019, he was charged with a high-risk domestic violence case. The victim in that case is listed as a family household member.
Meanwhile, a team of FBI agents and Cleveland detectives combed through that duplex, hauling equipment in and out, collecting evidence that would help solidify the case. Piece by piece, the picture was becoming clear. Adriana had been killed, hidden, and transported, and all signs pointed to one man. But Anthony Kennedy was still missing, and the longer he remained free, the more dangerous the situation became. But just when it seemed that Anthony might try to disappear altogether, the story took an unexpected turn. On November 30, 2022, less than a week after Adriana's body was discovered, Anthony Kennedy made a decision that stunned the public. He turned himself in. Accompanied by his attorney, Blaine Jones, Anthony walked silently into the Allegheny County Police Department headquarters in Pittsburgh, just 140 miles from his home in Cleveland. His attorney later explained that Anthony still had family ties in the Pittsburgh area and wanted to avoid a dangerous confrontation with law enforcement. Jones told reporters that his client knew about the nationwide manhunt and didn't want harm to come to himself or his family. He stated that it is always dangerous when you have a warrant, let alone a national manhunt, and that Anthony wanted to face the charges. Anthony remained expressionless as cameras captured his arrival.
For many watching, it was the first glimpse of the man accused of ending Adriana's life. Meanwhile, FBI agents and Cleveland detectives were still scouring the West 98th Street duplex, pulling evidence that would later be critical in court. And although Anthony's surrender brought a measure of relief, the battle for justice was only beginning. Because turning himself in was just the first step, what awaited him in court would determine the rest of his life. When Anthony Kennedy was finally in custody, attention shifted to Cleveland, where prosecutors began building their case against him. The charges were grave: aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and offenses against a human corpse. Each count painted a chilling picture of what had happened to Adriana, and together, they carried the weight of a possible life sentence.
43-year-old Anthony Kennedy turning himself in to police 2 days after a warrant was issued for his arrest. The same day, investigators in Cleveland raided a home in search of him. Walking alongside Kennedy today, his attorney, Blaine Jones.
If anyone's charged with something this serious, I think you run the gamut of emotions. But I thought that it was commendable that he turned himself in. I mean, that's the first positive step. It's not like he's on the run somewhere.
Kennedy placed in handcuffs nearly a week after 23-year-old Adriana Taylor, who he allegedly lived with in Cleveland, Ohio, was found behind a home on Hill Avenue in Wilkinsburg. Surveillance footage captured on Thanksgiving shows someone get out of a car and eventually walk to the backyard, where Taylor was found hours later.
I understand that there's video out there. I would ask everyone to be patient and allow due process to play out. I have not seen the full video. I've seen snippets, but I'm sure I'll get more in discovery.
Investigators said Taylor was found wrapped in plastic, buried under cement, with a gunshot wound to the head. Tonight, her uncle, Christopher Carter, telling Pittsburgh's Action News 4, quote, "I'm just glad that he turned himself in. I hope that she has found peace. She will be missed." Jones described the urgency he felt in Kennedy turning himself in.
It's always dangerous when you have a warrant, let alone a national manhunt for an arrest warrant like this. And it was Mr. Kennedy's desire to turn himself in ASAP. He did not want any type of harm to come to him or his family. And quite frankly, he wanted to face the charges.
Jones said Kennedy will be extradited back to Cleveland because that is allegedly where Taylor was. It is unclear, though, if he will face any charges here in Allegheny County.
The case made its way into the Kiowa County Court of Common Pleas under the authority of Judge Timothy McCormick. Courtrooms are often places where cold facts are laid bare, but in this trial, emotions simmered just beneath the surface. Adriana's family sat in attendance, their eyes fixed on the man accused of taking her life. Reporters filled the gallery, their pens and cameras capturing every move, every word, every detail. But then a major development changed the trajectory of the trial. Instead of dragging Adriana's loved ones through a long and painful testimony process, Anthony Kennedy entered a guilty plea. By admitting to aggravated murder and the related charges, he spared the family the agony of reliving every moment through witnesses and evidence. For some, the plea brought relief. For others, it deepened the wound because no explanation accompanied his admission of guilt. The why behind Adriana's killing remained unanswered. With the plea on record, the focus turned to sentencing. On that day, the courtroom carried a heavy silence as Judge McCormick addressed Kennedy. The judge outlined the seriousness of his crimes, the calculated way Adriana had been killed, the deliberate attempt to conceal her body, and the disregard for her humanity. Finally, the sentence was handed down: life in prison. Kennedy would have his first chance at parole only after serving 20 years, though for Adriana's family, no number of years could equate to justice. The truth, however, was even more horrifying than anyone imagined. The official record showed that Kennedy not only ended Adriana's life, but also attempted to erase her from existence, hiding her under layers of concrete as though her light could be extinguished so easily. Instead, her story became a rallying cry. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the community reacted with a mix of grief and outrage. Candlelight vigils were organized in both Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers gathered to honor Adriana's memory. They shared stories of her bright smile, her loyalty to family, and the way that she could light up a room. Many spoke of her by her nicknames, Dree or Age, remembering her as the life of the party, a young woman who lived with an energy that was infectious. Social media became a space where tributes poured in. Posts filled with pictures of Adriana, smiling with friends and family, spread across timelines with messages calling for justice and urging others to be vigilant against domestic violence. In schools, workplaces, and churches, her story was shared as both a cautionary tale and a reminder of how deeply intimate partner violence can devastate lives. Despite the pain, the family gathered their strength for Adriana's funeral. On December 16, 2022, services were held at the House of Peace Funeral Home in Cleveland. The day began with a wake where mourners viewed photographs, shared embraces, and whispered memories of better times. Soon after, the main service filled the chapel with Adriana's family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors. Her parents, Anya and Cedric, sat together, surrounded by her siblings, Wade, Josh, Teresia, Cedric, and Tanisha. 3 grandmothers who had cherished Adriana throughout her life attended as well, their grief visible, but softened by the presence of so many who had come to honor her. A special cousin, Daija, stood among the mourners, alongside a host of extended family and friends. Eulogies painted a portrait of Adriana as a free spirit, someone who never let the weight of the world dim her joy. Those who spoke described her as hardworking, dependable, and full of laughter. She lived life fully, and though her years were far too few, she left behind memories that would remain etched in the hearts of everyone she touched. The funeral was not just a moment of farewell. It was a declaration that Adriana's life mattered, that she would not be reduced to the manner of her death. Even as tears flowed, there was a determination to keep her spirit alive in stories, photos, and the lasting bonds of family. But justice would not come easily, and the battle was far from over. For Adriana's family, healing is an ongoing process, and the scars left by her death run deep. Yet they've also expressed gratitude that her killer was brought to justice, gratitude for the community's support, and gratitude for the chance to share Adriana's light with the world one more time. Her story continues to raise important questions. How can communities better protect individuals from intimate partner violence? What more can be done to intervene when red flags appear? And how can we ensure that the memories of victims are honored beyond the headlines? What lessons do you take from Adriana's story? What red flags do you believe should never be ignored in relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story impactful, please subscribe to the channel and share it, because telling these stories not only honors the victims, but also helps protect others. Let us know what you think in the comments section below.